welcome back to our discussion with Dave Robau. He's a founder of Gulf Coast Energy Network. He's the CEO and chief scientist of National Energy USA, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Now, one of your day jobs is serving as the chief scientist and chief executive officer of National Energy USA. Will you please tell us a little bit about National Energy USA and your technology?
Yeah, sometimes I forget, especially this time of year, that I actually have a day job that actually pays me, and responsibilities and staff and different things like that. So anyway, I guess it was 2016. I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug.
Oh wow!
And I left my cushy Air Force job, much to my wife's dismay, and I left all that behind, and I jumped into entrepreneurship, and I started National Energy. So the goal was really focused around two things. My nemesis in life, landfills, putting landfills out of business. Landfills, if you don't know, are one of the most destructive things that our society does, not just to the planet, but to our life support system. They can effectively pollute the air, land, and water all at the same time. And there's really only two kinds of landfills, in my opinion. Landfills that leak toxic leachates down into drinking water supplies, and brand new landfills. Those are the only two types of landfills. So we formed National Energy as a way to do a couple things at the same time. Number one, reduce our dependence on solid waste landfills. Number two, recover as much of that material to put back into the circular economy. And the third one was one that a lot of people don't think about, but about half of what you throw into the bin, like my house, your house, we have this magic vortex, right? That when we put things in it, we come back from work, they've disappeared. It's amazing, right? We call it a garbage can.
Yeah.
So about half of what goes into that garbage can are materials that can be converted, into energy, using different types of technology. So we saw this as an opportunity to also tackle this other issue, and that is, the emissions associated with burning of fossil fuels. If we could take this organic material and put it into an anaerobic digester, produce renewable natural gas, and reduce the dependency on that natural resource, we felt like we can solve a number of different problems simultaneously.
Well, in addition to your role as CEO, I notice you're also the chief scientist. And I've always been fascinated by that because we've had breakfast and lunch together many times and talked. Yeah. Can you talk about your role as chief scientist?
Yeah, that's my favorite role. I'll be honest with you. CEO is a bureaucratic title that I'm looking to kind of push off to somebody else that knows how to run a company. I'm a scientist, as I mentioned earlier. Scientists are problem solvers, and that's a lot of what I'm focused on. But for me, it's really about sitting down with the customer, understanding what their concerns are, getting a sense for what's in the art of the possible, as we like to say. Because a lot of what we do is we try and identify, we reverse engineer from the solution back to the problem. And what we do is, using first principles thinking, we try and identify what are the potential roadblocks. Like, why are you stuck here? What are the barriers why aren't there vendors in here looking to solve your challenge? Because what we do through a partnership with one of the big Wall Street banks is we provide our service as a service. So what I mean by that is we come in with a technological solution that the customer has an expense. Let's just say it's a couple of $1 million a year that they're spending just to move their waste from their transfer station to the landfill. Well, if you took that and you committed that on a 10-year contract and you awarded it to a vendor like National Energy, we can use that and we can go out and we can secure financing where we bring the solution to you. So we own, operate, we call it a D-boom. We design, build, own, operate, and maintain it. So it's our system. So as a scientist, I like to get down into the numbers. I like to sit with the customer and understand, okay, where are your goals?
One of the things I've always been impressed of is your involvement with all types of energy. You're on the advisory board for the Florida Solar Energy Center. Is there much interaction between the research that you do and the research that FSEC does?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people don't realize how how beneficial that organization actually is, because it's not just a bunch of academics and professors, right? They have really grown that. Jim Fenton and his crew have really done an amazing job. I've only been a part of that for a handful of years, let's say, but when I go to those meetings down in Cocoa and I look across the room, and I'm just kind of like, wow, they got some really like heavy hitters in this room. You know, I think that's where I met Chris Castro, Kelly Smith Burke, who was the director here at the Energy Office in Florida, and not just those folks, but people that come from the commercial sector. So Publix is represented, and you got these big named brands in Florida that are all sitting around the room, collaborating to try and solve some common problems.
You and I were talking beforehand a little bit about we're helping sponsor and speaking at a decarbonization conference that's going to be later this year. And ASHRAE, AIA, IFMA, BOMA, and APA are helping to sponsor it. I'm seeing a lot more emphasis on the term decarbonization rather than energy efficiency, emissions reduction, sustainability. Are you seeing the same type of thing? And do you think it really makes a difference?
Yes, I am. I'll give you a little bit of context. So, like I said, I go back several years, right? I'm kind of OG. I was doing this. I was doing sustainability before sustainability was cool.
Okay.
So in the beginning, it was really all focused around conservation, and I think the central thinking was we need to have an ROI. So if I can replace this inefficient with this efficient and have an ROI, I can justify making this conversion, whatever it might be. So lighting obviously was the low-hanging fruit, and then mechanical systems. So it was really all about kind of the building system, the building technologies, insulation, building envelope improvements, those kinds of things. And then I think after a while, a couple of things happened. Back then, I was an early adopter with solar. I've had solar on my house for 15 years. The wattage on my panels this is how old it is. They're 250 watt modules. And now we're installing like 600 watt modules, right? So the efficiencies have gone up considerably. I think over the last decade, what we've seen is grid parity, meaning the cost of solar is now cost competitive with the cost of power, coming out of the grid. So technology has increased. And then we also have some different financing tools that we didn't have before, because now, you can do a long-term contract with solar because you have some confidence on the efficiencies. So I feel that two things happen. That's kind of the first one. The second one is this climate crisis, which, those of us that have been in this industry for a long time, especially with the scientific background, like none of us really questioned it. We were kind of like, the scientific community is in 97% consensus. Like, this is happening. Now the question is, why is it happening and what can we do? So I think this last decade was really focused around decarbonization, because what's happening is the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere is reaching unsustainable levels, and you can't just turn the dial back. So I think what I've seen is what you're seeing too, is the focus on decarbonization. And I think technology certainly plays a role there, but there's a lot of policy things that can and should be done. I always say, I'm a scientist, not a politician, but I wish the politicians wouldn't pretend to be scientists either. I think,
amen.
Yeah. So I've definitely seen that. I can tell you this: where there is consensus, whether you wear a blue jersey or a red jersey, where there is consensus is on job creation and the green economy and those types of things. So what we're seeing across the country is a lot of the kind of Rust Belt states are now getting massive investments in battery technology manufacturing and just all kinds of things. And so we've gone from kind of that blue collar worker who was on the Ford assembly line to now kind of like a green collar worker who's building next generation battery technologies. One that I'm really interested in personally is hydrogen. Hydrogen. So the joke around the patch is, regardless of when you ask me, hydrogen is 10 years out. So if we have a conversation 8 years from now, it's another 10 years. But I really think there's companies like Fuel Cell Energy that have really cracked the code, and we're working with them because, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, if you break garbage down, the organic material in garbage, you can create biomethane. Well, if you take biomethane, you can put it in a fuel cell and create hydrogen. So green hydrogen is, the new kind of buzzword. And I can usually tell when the bandwagon is getting full when I look around and I see utilities on the bandwagon. I'm like, okay. So now they're finally getting it, so the memo is out. All the utilities in Florida are kind of jumping all over themselves to do hydrogen projects. So so those are some areas where I think we're going to see, quite a bit, and hopefully, garbage. Hopefully we start to see the relevance of garbage as a renewable source of energy.
Dave, it's always such a treat to just spend time with you. I walk away thinking, wow, he's covering a lot of ground. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks. I love the opportunity. Yeah.